1983, Stephen King wrote many different kinds of books, from Stephen King's It to Cujo to possibly every other book that he has created. But one of them was the most scariest one of them all, and that was a book about an evil 1958 Plymouth Fury. The car had a name. It had a name called Christine. And the story it gives you just makes you the fact that some things are far worse than fear itself. And what happens when that fear became a machine with a personality, one that spoke with death, obsession, and possession? It never sympathizes anyone, it only sympathizes its owner. And when people go near it, that's when everything went wrong. The car goes after people who hurt it, who harmed its owner, and then its retaliation for revenge. And everything that you fell in love with just became far worse. This is the story of Stephen King's Christine, the famous 1983 horror film about a sentient living car. So, what exactly is Christine? Well, it's simple. Stephen King's Christine is a book published by Stephen King on October 31st, 1983. So, what I obviously tell you about this book is that it was basically the most terrifying thing of all things. And in fact, what makes Christine so different is that Christine is not a monster made out of blood. No, she's made out of metal. And she is a car, a 1958 Plymouth Fury. The Plymouth Fury is the most recognizable vehicle in the 1950s, but in the 1980s it felt obscure. It felt out of place. It felt unnatural. And that's when everything was told directly into one thing alone. What if it was made for a Stephen King book? And that story was true. The story actually involves around a teenager who was being bullied at school and was being pushed around. When the teenager was being bullied all the time, he purchases a vehicle, particularly this red vehicle, a 1958 Plymouth Fury. The vehicle itself was red, and it had a white roof, but it had one name alone, one that almost speaks of death and evil, and that is Christine. There is something else about the story. What exactly is Christine? Where did she come from? And what was the story behind it? Well, it's simple. The story of Stephen King's Christine was inspired by a real haunted car, particularly the 1964 Dodge Polara 330, also known by its nickname, the Golden Eagle, which is said to be the most haunted car in the United States. Legend has it that when many vandals tried to destroy the Golden Eagle, they ended up being taken out in the most horrible ways possible. 3 victims were hit by a truck. 3 more were then struck by lightning, and 4 more died in a house fire. What the curse actually was is that not only the cursed car was evil, it was killing all vandals who were involved in destroying the vehicle. And when the vehicle comes back to life, that's when everything went wrong. And what the details ever told you is that Stephen King was basically inspired by this alleged cursed car, and the alleged cursed car was actually now being linked to one of Stephen King's best-selling books in 1983. That being said was Christine, 1983. Among the cars that were used for Christine, the original script was supposed to have portrayed a Ford Mustang or a Chevrolet Camaro as the killer car, but Stephen King chose a different option. He chose this, a 1958 Plymouth Fury. But why choose a Plymouth Fury? Because the Plymouth Fury at that time was a forgotten vehicle in that era of the 1980s, and it became obscure. Stephen King wanted a vehicle that doesn't have an explanation, nor origin story, no idea of where it came from. And he chose this, a 1958 Plymouth Fury. The story of Christine is the most unsettling detail about the movie itself. The movie explains no specific detail of what exactly Christine is. Christine is portrayed as a 1958 Plymouth Fury. However, in the book, the car was described as a 1956 or 1957 Plymouth Belvedere or Plymouth Savoy Fury. Although the movie itself actually portrays the Plymouth Savoy, the Plymouth Fury, and the Belvedere at the same time, because both of those cars in the 1950s were basically based on just one singular car with different trim levels based on the same body design. The anomaly of having a killer car in Stephen King's books is just by far the most terrifying experience any kid would imagine. In fact, the story of the killer car itself wasn't just portrayed as evil, it was something else, really. 1983 was the year that everyone fell in love with cars, and the Plymouth Fury might be the most substitutional detail that makes you believe what the car actually was. The car was red, but then you realize something else. In reality, the Plymouth Fury was never really red. It was buckskin beige with a gold anodized trim. And what makes Stephen King's Christine far more different is that not only it portrays the Plymouth Fury as a different personality, but it just mixes up the whole story as a coincidence. And sometimes coincidences don't come in easy. They become in the most unnatural places in the world. And that unnatural spot was the car itself. So let's dive into Christine, 1983. The book was adapted by Stephen King in October 31st of 1983, but it was made into a film by John Carpenter in the same year, October 31st of 1983. But what many people don't actually remember is that what exactly is Christine and what was her name based off? Well, it's simple. Christine, in the geographical sense, could actually stand for female spirit or female demon, or in that case, a demon who is partially female. That could mean one thing. Christine's name was not based on a human name, but it could be based on a devilish name which derives from that of mythological factors. Christine might actually be a female demon, but there was something else that the book never explains. The book itself portrays that of an evil spirit possessing the car, which is Christine, formerly as a human only to become alive as a sentient car. But in the movie, we actually see that Christine is the monster, not as a human in the book, but as the car itself. The book and movie just makes complete differences. Christine in the book actually possesses the car, while Christine in the movie was actually the car itself. But there is something else that many people don't remember. Was Christine formerly human, or why was she turned into a car? Well, the movie never explains why she was a car, but it could be implied that the owner who originally had her must have died from a serious accident, and that accident must have made Christine turned into a car. So this could likely be another detail that many people never actually caught. Here's what makes the detail far more creepier. Christine's license plate reads CQB 241. That means if you ever see the license plate with the letters CQB and the numbers 241, that means you are in for a lot of trouble. Trust me, you do not want to get into Christine's wrath. Unless you do, you're in for a big punishment for your entire life. Christine wasn't just a nightmare of a sentient vehicle killing people. It's a nightmare that sometimes even machines can become possessive, wrathful, vengeful, in the most violent and obscure ways. The Plymouth Fury wasn't just terrifying, it was a symbol of pride, But when it comes to Halloween, it becomes the symbol of terror, violence, and obsession. The Plymouth Fury wasn't just a powerful vehicle, it became the vehicle that was possessed by some sort of demon with a female personality and a female attitude. The savagery of a female character being portrayed as a living car just makes it far more terrifying. Christine's story doesn't just imply that to any means necessary. Christine didn't mean to kill anyone. She was only doing it for their own good. And sometimes maybe that punishment wasn't just judgmental, but it felt personal. The 1983 film Christine just portrays how much she would obsess over something, and that something just comes back with a vengeance. And that vengeance itself had an engine that roars with bloodthirst, not fuel. And that bloodthirst became Christine's wrath. And that is the story of Stephen King's famous 1983 horror novel, Christine.